Good morning, Vietnam. And here I am back again. And I am going to be, again, very, very critical of what I think, again, is such a pathetic article by the New York Times. What's his name? His name is Uri Berliner. An odd name, but I'm going to do it in two parts. The first part is I've taken notes from his article, and on the second part I will be looking at the article written by the New York Times. So his original article was written a few days ago and published in the published in the Free Press. So let's look at that first, and then we'll go into the New York Times coverage of that article. But of course, they don't do any in-depth interview and criticize, or ask him to back up anything he says in the article. So, again, these writers, I don't know who they are, in the sense that they are doing everyone a disservice. I mean, doesn't New York Times have any more real reporters left who can write real articles and discuss and ask critical questions of the person or the article they're writing their response to? It doesn't seem like it. So we keep getting this garbage from the New York Times. So, first I want to say, please subscribe and hopefully like, and of course dislike. 2 days ago I watched TYT, Anna Kasparian, do also a review of this guy's article, and to say I was disappointed is an understatement. I think it is one of the worst shows I've seen TYT do. She, like the New York Times, was not really critical of anything he said, and of course didn't comment that he didn't back up almost anything he said in that article. So, that being said, I've listened to NPR, especially Democracy Now!, since I would say 1982, when I was living in the LA area for 32 years, from 81 to 2012, whatever. The last 20 years I didn't listen to it very often, but in the first 10 years I would say I almost listened to it every morning. And Berliner states that somehow there's been a swing to the left and non-transparency, and all the typical right-wing talking points that people like hear, the way they talk and the words they use to disparage something they don't like anymore. NPR's always been left-wing. I mean, to think otherwise is stupidity. But to me, they've always done articles, and at least Democracy Now!, telling the truth of what's going on in the US, but also around the world. I remember Amy Goodman in either 82 or 83 in a helicopter in an East African country, maybe Niger or Nigeria, risking her life to get a story in this helicopter. I mean, that's real reporting. This guy sat behind a desk his whole life. What has he really reported? Now, I know they claim, which I'll get back to in the New York Times coverage of the article. So I think Berliner is just an apologist. His behavior in publishing this article in the the free press, yes, the free press, is just a coward's act. That's all it was in the end. It's exactly like James Comey, who headed the FBI in 2016, and right 1 week before the election, the presidential election, he decided that he was going to be the man of the hour, the hero that saved American democracy, because he had something stuck up his ass about Hillary Clinton. So he decided that he would go to the national press and say that he is going to reopen the investigation of her emails on a private server about the Libya dossier. I mean, what a cowardly act. He just did it all by himself. The same with this guy. He went to a right-wing news outlet to grieve his issues with NPR. I mean, both in his article and the New York Times coverage do not question him why he chose not to go over all his problems. In the 25 years he worked, he's still working at NPR. And like the coward he is, I bet he will retire or quit NPR very soon. Just like John Hur, the special counsel that covered the president's, Joe Biden's, taking of documents from the secret documents from the White House, and he investigated President Biden and concluded that there was nowhere near enough facts to be able to charge him, indict him. But in his report, unbelievably, he put in his own opinions on how he felt about Joe Biden's mental, memory, and his general health. I mean, absolutely disgusting how a federal employee, a special counsel, starts throwing in his personal opinions on things. And then when he was in front of a Senate committee, the transcript was read back to him, and it said that Biden remembered very accurately many things. And when they asked her why that portion of the transcript was not included in his report, he said, "I think the transcript is incorrect." What a coward. What a pathetic human being. And guess what? The next day he resigned because he had nowhere to go. So I think Berliner has definitely got some sour grape or even a personal vendetta with someone within the NPR, that he's suddenly spewing this garbage. Again, he had 25 years to spew it out at NPR if you want to change the reporting and the transparency of the reporting. Of course, NPR is not going to open up their books. They're not going to suddenly invite a reporter into their boardrooms and so they can listen to what's going on. But obviously Berliner, he wants them to. So it seems like I think Berliner was thrown to the side within the NPR organization because, and I'm guessing that he wanted more power. He wanted to do things his way, and it appears to me like a number of left-wing centrist Democrats have suddenly moved to the right. Quite a few of them. And that's what it appears Mr. Berliner has done with his political beliefs. And he brings up the issue of how many viewers NPR is losing, but that can be said of any online publication or radio stations. This has been going on for a long, long time. Since the internet came into existence, it's been taking more and more people away from newspapers, radio stations, and other than generally the extreme right wing, which gets most of its viewers from Fox. Even Fox has been losing its viewers since it got that libel lawsuit against them for $850 million. It became not so right wing, and even fired their best presenter. So the only way that NPR is going to survive if it changes. But apparently for Mr. Berliner, he felt that they should have stayed where they were. Now, is it double-handed? Is it a stab in the back? I don't know, because nobody asked him the question why he's doing this. And within his article, he cites three main reasons why he published this article. The first one is on the Mueller report. And in my opinion, the Mueller report was never, ever going to indict President Trump, because Robert Mueller, was a die-hard Republican, number one. Number two, he was a government man. There's no way he was going to disparage Trump to the extent where you could, and find facts even, to indict him. That was never, ever going to happen. And I've covered Mueller and Mueller's report in another podcast I did on how media has failed the public and its listeners and the world in general miserably, and that was one of the cases. And in fact, Berliner's article says he exonerated Trump. Well, he did not exonerate Trump at all. And in fact, the way Berliner states it, all he's doing is paraphrasing what Barr said, the Attorney General at the time, that it did exonerate him. It absolutely did not exonerate him, and anyone can look up and see that he did not. The second article instance he brings up is the Hunter Biden laptop. Again, it's something that's been again and again proven and shown, and especially recently. So why he brings it up is beyond me, that the only thing on the laptop really was photos of Hunter Biden, in compromising positions, naked. So in fact, NPR called it correctly when they never believed that there was anything on the laptop, so they didn't cover it extensively. So they made an editorial choice, and it turned out to be 100% correct. So why is he bringing it up? They would have spent all their time on the story on the laptop, and it would have been to no avail. Even Hunter Biden's best friend, under oath, said many times that Hunter Biden never discussed business with his father in front of anyone that he was aware of. And the other thing is, why didn't Berliner bring up the issue with Jared Kushner's $2 billion gift to him from the Saudis? Why isn't he bringing that up, and how maybe NPR should be covering that every single day, and yet they've wasted all that time trying to get through Hunter to his father, Joe Biden, and impeach him. The third story is the COVID-19 virus. In all my reading, and I've read quite a few articles, that highly probable, and I would say around 80%, that the virus started in the meat market very close to the Wuhan laboratory where they were doing research on viruses. There has been at least 10% of people who believe, but again, zero proof that the COVID virus started in the Wuhan lab and was released accidentally from the Wuhan lab. He quotes the early last year, I think it was, or sometime like that, he quotes the Energy Department that he concluded it probably came from the lab, but with very low confidence. In other words, there's zero proof. They're saying there is a probability, and as I've said, there's probably anywhere between 10 and 20% probability that it did come from the Wuhan lab. But they can't prove it. It's just a conspiracy to deflect on so many issues. That's all Berlin is doing, deflecting. And in fact, I even 2 days ago when I researched it again, the virus, is that more than half, it doesn't say how many of course, God forbid, of the early cases of the virus were detected in people who were at the market. So, now, he also states, back in 2012, NPR tilted a bit to the left. As I said right in the beginning, it is a leftist, left of centre news outlet. I have never heard it more than right of centre in anything I've ever read, seen or heard on NPR. So I don't know what he is talking about. And then I'll quote Berliner, he says, "No image generated more pride within NPR than the farmer listening to Morning Edition from his or her tractor at sunrise." Wow. You talk about a right-wing apologist. It just brings up memory of the great Ronald Reagan sitting in front of his fireplace doing his fireside chats in the 8 years he was in power, and suddenly, he's bringing his memory back up that, yeah, we want to go live in the past. We don't want to move on to the future. Bring the old times back. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Berliner. You're just a right-winger. The third, another part of the NPR's reporting that he did not like was the reporting of the George Floyd murder in May 2020. Quoting him, "Is America, as progressive activists claim, beset by systemic racism in the 2020s? I mean, where has this guy been living? I mean, does he listen to Fox News every day and then go to work at NPR? I mean, I went to the US in 1980. I mean, the racism and the number of African Americans who get killed by police is staggering, let alone all the research that's been done on how African Americans don't get bank loans, of course, getting pulled over all the time. And to his instances, I researched, this is from an article in The Guardian, of course not in the New York Times, from January 3rd, 2024. Police in LA, California. Police show severe racial bias in stops and searches. But it hasn't really gotten any better. That's what they've been doing for the last 100 years. So why does he make statements as I quoted him earlier? And the second one on the police, this is dated March 4th, 2022. Police killed 1,055 people. That's almost 3 a day in 2022. 1,021 in 2020, 999 in 2019. Black people are around 13% of the population, but that's 27, and they have been shot at, murdered, killed, whatever, 27% of the fatalities. That's twice the rate as white people. So where has your head been, Mr. Berliner? Obviously up your ass. So now we will switch to the reviewing the actual article in the New York Times. I will be showing the article on the screen and then commenting our written notes on it, but we'll be commenting directly off the article in the New York Times. So now here in front of you is the article in the New York Times, NPR in turmoil after it is accused of liberal bias. Unbelievable, as I've already discussed. Subtitle, an essay from an editor at the broadcaster has generated a firestorm of criticism about the network on social media, especially among conservatives. Of course, and this is where this article, the reporting on Berliner, really hits it on the head. I believe this is why he wrote the article, because he wants to defund NPR, because he's become right-wing, and that's why he published that article in the Free Press, a very right-wing, well, I won't say very, but definitely a right-wing outlet. So here he is, the photo in the opening page of the article, and it's staggering to me that they have picked him in this pose and his facial expression and where his eyes are. It's almost identical to an article the New York Times published a few weeks ago, which I also totally trashed, about a psychologist called Jonathan Haight, another total apologist who taking away cell phones is going to cure us of all life's negative effects. So again, I guess they got the same photographer, or they believe if they show Berliner in this light, in this pose, it gets him more sympathy and more credibility. And anyway, and it starts with the claim that it's the attacks from prominent conservatives. Well, that's only because of the article he has written. Now, so one person writes an article, and then all these prominent conservatives believe everything he has said in his article, which I've just debunked many of the issues he raises in his article. So who said? Only he said. So one person says something and then the rest of the world collapses. Like TYT's coverage was not very good. Again, it's always been a liberal, left-leaning news outlet. Again, published in the Free Press. Again, why? Why didn't he take it directly to NPR over the last 25 years? The article quotes him, people at every level of NPR have comfortably coalesced around the progressive worldview. I mean, aren't they going to attack him on this? The two people who wrote the article, have they ever listened to NPR? From their photos, they look old enough at least to have listened to it probably 20 years ago. What do they think? Why don't they give their opinion and ask him? And here we go. Mr. Berliner, a Peabody Award-winning journalist. Of course, they have to say that because now it gives him so-called credibility. Another expert again telling us that you should listen to me because I won the Peabody. And he's castigated NPR for the things that I have debunked. It mentions here the origins of COVID-19, which of course is very, very minutely correct, and the war in Gaza. I mean, I think every center-left news organization is pro-Palestinians. What part of that doesn't he see? The Palestinians have been living in an open prison for 70 years. What part of that doesn't he see? Of course, someone like NPR and so many other news outlets like TYT and the Majority Report are pro-Palestinians. What is his problem? I miswrote. As I've said earlier, I've been listening to back in the day, since 1983. I've written 803. But he also said the internal culture at NPR had placed race and identity as paramount in nearly every aspect of the workplace. Well, again, prove it, show it. What is the race percentages within NPR? What is the identity within? You're talking about gays? Are you talking about transgender? What are you talking about? Tell us. Prove it. Don't just say it. And Juan Gonzalez, who's been doing Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman since, I recall, 1983. So, yes, it is. But what percentage? And of course, as I said, I think this is Mr. Berliner's real reason is to stab NPR in the back. And of course, Trump gets on his social media platform, which he's argued before, and I recall going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, that the right-wing governments, all of them, Republican governments of course, have been trying to shut down any funding or keep decreasing it every chance they get because they are critical, much, much more so, of Republican government and their policies. This is why, in the end, I believe he is doing it. And of course, NPR said, it's a lot of crap. They don't agree with anything he said. And some other NPR journalists also criticised the essay publicly, including Eric Deggans, its TV critic, who faulted Mr. Berliner for not giving NPR an opportunity to comment on the piece. And I write, gutless to face the staff, because he knows he would be totally shot down. But they would listen to him. He's not the boss there, he's not the CEO, he's just a senior editor. They don't have to listen to him. Who cares in the end if they don't follow what he says? He could have brought this up over the last 25 years. He could have quit any time he wanted to. And of course, he expressed no regrets about publishing the essay, saying he loved NPR. Well, if he loved it so much, he would have not published it. Because now it's going to maybe lose more funding, and then NPR will do less shows, which is one of the things he complained about. And I write here, I am sure he will leave soon, like Prime Minister Cameron in England, UK rather. After he made the mess with Brexit, he quit. The same as the Prime Minister of Australia, the last Prime Minister, Morrison. As soon as he was outed, lost the last election, guess what? He quit. But one of the reasons he quit is that he was holding 3 portfolio positions, which has never ever been heard of in Australian politics, for the Prime Minister to hold any position within the government other than but the Prime Minister. So he was holding 3 portfolios, and of course I believe he quit because he didn't want. Hopefully he was thinking hopefully that no one will notice that he was holding these 3 portfolios. And Berliner goes on, I published it in hoping that something would change, have a broader conversation. So pathetic. And of course, he said he hasn't been disciplined. Well, of course, everybody has a right to their opinion, but it's the way he did it that makes me sick. And as the new chief executive, Catherine Mayer, says in their last meet and greet, she said during the lunch, Miss Chapman told the host that she didn't want Mr. Berliner to become a martyr. I don't know who Miss Chapman is. Yeah, of course. Maybe that's the other reason. Of course, in one Slack messages, in one group, several staff members disputed Mr. Berliner's points about a lack of ideological diversity and said efforts to recruit more people of colour would make NPR's journalism better. Well, that's generally the case. I don't know how true it is. During the meeting at NPR, which I just mentioned, an NPR producer took issue with Mr. Berliner's argument for why NPR's listenership has fallen off, describing a variety of factors that have contributed to the change. And I write, times have changed, politics, demographics, the way people interact with each other, the way they're getting all the information off the internet. They don't listen to radio. They don't watch TV anywhere near as much as they used to. People are on their cell phones all the time. So, yeah, as I said earlier, all news outlets, especially radio, have fallen off dramatically in the last 10 to 20 years, and, TV watchers. And in fact, again, why I think Mr. Berliner's actions have been a stab in the back to NPR, the managing editor of Standards and Practices said in an interview that he rejected all of Mr. Berliner's claims of unfairness, adding that his remarks would probably make it harder for NPR journalists to do their jobs, because Berliner complained a lot about that they weren't getting enough. He meant right-wing politicians and experts on their shows. Well, now they definitely, as Mr. Carvin states, the next time one of our people calls up a Republican congressman or something and tries to get an answer from them, they may well say, "Oh, I read these stories. You guys aren't fair, so I'm not going to talk to you." And I think that's exactly what's going to happen, because very, very few right-wing, Republicans, congressmen, senators go onto any centrist or left-wing leaning major news outlets. And of course we have 2 people that supported him. Well, this is what I don't understand. Why aren't the journalists asking all these questions I bring up? 2 people. How many people did they go? Did they call up? How many people? None at NPR and asked. Other than these 2 guys who obviously published something. Well, one of them published it on Facebook and the other on social media. So obviously these 2 writers didn't call anyone up at NPR and do some fact checking and look at who supported Berliner and who didn't. And then he goes on obviously about the lack of support for the Israeli government and the IDF for murdering what now 30,000 Palestinians. So finally, he talked about the budget that NPR had to cut 10% of their staff because they had a 30 million budget shortfall. Obviously, it is a company and they have to limit their losses and hopefully make money. And as I've said a few times already, listeners have drifted away from traditional radios to podcasts, and the advertising market has been unsteady, let alone collapsing. Just look at Twitter and what's happened to that. And of course, he's now blaming John Lansing, the previous CEO. Well, did these reporters try to find Lansing, try to discuss anything that Mr. Berliner has stated and dumped it on, a lot of it on Mr. Lansing's feet? Anyway, I write finally, Rhonda McDaniels is a disgrace to the human race. How could she possibly work or even think of working for NBC? The NBC executives that actually hired her, for 5 days, you couldn't be more stupid. And of course, these 2 writers didn't go into any detail of the 6 items he talks about in his article that can easily be disparaged, put down, and facts be given to him to show that the statements he is making is not correct, and correct to a very, very small degree. Anyway, thanks for listening, and you can see there is one of my reference to the Mueller report, and you can read why the Mueller report failed because of Mueller himself. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.